The Real Estate Photography Podcast is brought to you by tourbuzz.net, high-definition virtual tour and photograph hosting, now with interactive floor plans. Sign up for your free trial today. Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Photography Podcast with Mike Muriello. This is episode 122, exterior, lighting, post-production, and business tip number, I don't know. There are too many things going on in this episode to condense it, so I'll just cover all those areas. Okay, so this is a dusk shot, and I'm just going to go ahead and explain how to make these dusk shots minimalistically and make them look good, and it involves some post. But anyway, here's a shot of a house at dusk. The sun is going down, the sky is cool blue, you can see in the windows as opposed to reflection. All the lights on the inside and the outside are turned on. It looks nice. Okay, so that's finalized. And oh, by the way, I like that car going by, which is why I picked this one. Kind of adds a perspective, and you can actually tell how large the house is. This is the raw shot. So obviously you can see from the first one, nothing's done with exposure. You gotta nail that exposure in camera. If you want, you can go ahead and kind of paint on some exposure, additional exposure in the roof or the front of the house if your lights are too far back. But for the most part, you got to get that. Now back here, you can see this is minimalistic setup. 3 lights, 3 strobes, radio triggered. There's one, obviously you can see right there. See if it loads. There you go. There's one over here. You can see the light to light up this side of the house, and then one on the far left. These are just whatever strobes, 2 SB600s and an SB800 that I happened to have in my camera bag at the time, so that's what I used. Okay, the reason why I got to use 2 on the front is because if you put 1 straight in the front, you got to hit it head on and you lose the texture. Plus, you're going to have fall off on the edges, so you need to light up the house with at least 2. I'm sure people who are very experienced with this have done it. There's 100 different ways to do it. You can get like a lot of different Home Depot work lights and set them up. This is, once again, minimalistic setup, and you can still get results that look just like this. Anyway, the lights are set up on the sides, and you can obviously see them. Don't worry about that. If you understand how to use Photoshop, you can cut them out. It's kind of like you do get a little bit of leeway, a little bit of wiggle room to get rid of those lights and get them where you want them placed too. Okay, so basically you've got that, and you can pull out the lights there, and then you can do it again and pull out the shadows. We'll come back to the post-production in a minute. I just wanted to talk about nailing your exposure, and here's why it's important. So here's a shot. This is shot at 1/10 of a second. What's important here as I go through these, we got 1/10, 1/6, 1/5, and 1/4. 1/10 of a second. Pay attention to the windows and how bright the windows get. You can do shutter drag all you want and lighten the sky up. That's why it's a lot more important to nail your exposure of your windows as opposed to the sky. You can get your exposure for the windows and then just wait and gradually take a shot every 30 seconds as the sun goes down and it gets a little bit cooler. 1/10 of a second is this. There is 1/6 of a second. As you can see, the windows got a lot brighter. There's 1/5, and ignore the fact that the sky is getting brighter, just focus on the windows. And then there's 1/4. So let's just go ahead and compare 1/4 to 1/10. It's night and day. The way I prefer it like this, so you can see inside, you can see, not people or anything, but you can kind of see what's going on. When it gets too bright, it overexposes the trim of the house as well as what's inside. So, pick the exposure that you want, and then continue to go with that. That's kind of my advice on that. Okay, so how do you get from this with the lights and all that nice stuff into that? Well, that's actually not that difficult. What you do, and I'll go ahead and get rid of a couple of these posts and the light as opposed to all the shadows. It's a matter of using the clone stamp tool, but I would not recommend using it right on the background layer, nor would I recommend making a duplicate layer. I'd recommend creating a blank layer, making sure that it's sampling all layers, or you could just say current and below. It doesn't really matter because of what we're doing. And zoom in really tight. Uh-oh. Okay, zoom in really tight, like tighter than you need to be. And make sure your stamp tool is selected and make it a little bit smaller. We'll start here. Select, line it up, and you can basically paint right down. If my computer can survive. And it's relatively simple. And you notice the opacity is 100%. Usually when you're using the clone stamp tool, you're not at 100% because it'll start to look really fake. But when you're going straight down something like this, where everything is pretty much lined up, I'm not going to get rid of that. It'll take too long. But you can see, it's almost like magic. There it is. There it isn't. It's all gone. And you can do that with basically anything. Okay, I changed my mind. I'll do a little bit on the brick too. Okay, if we wanted to get rid of this shadow over here, this is not, once again, not that difficult. We'll option select a corner where it's supposed to be, and this is, you gotta be really, really careful with where you put it, or you'll get this weird, it'll look like it doesn't belong. And you basically paint in the sampled area, and of course you'd go down a little further, but, and you can see I'm pointing with my finger, you can see that this isn't right because the light actually is creating a bit of a flare, but you can get rid of that and pay a little more attention to it than I did just there. But it's pretty simple. You just got to zoom in tight and get out of there. As you can, this is annoying, you can see up here, it looks like I have a couple of hot pixels. There's one. I saw another one over here and a little one over there, which is a lot more noticeable than the other ones. I should probably be a little bit more upset about that. Not much you can do. Anyway, when you're all done, you can get something looking like this. I know there's still shadow here, over here behind this tree, but I just shot this last night for the purpose of showing this off, you know, showing what you can do with 3 lights and a beautiful house, which is not mine. I like the house, it's not mine. But anyway, the other thing I want to talk about real quick was business, which was, how do you market something like this? Dusk shots are, those are the things you see on the cover of real estate books, or, you know, when you got the fancy house, you want to see it at night so you can actually see. It just adds a new element, a new light, so to speak, no pun intended, to the house. So how do you market something like this? My recommendation would be, it's an additional cost. It's something that, you know, if they're selling $1 million home and they want to sell it, you know, whatever price it is, you would say, okay, I'll do the house for you, and I'll also give you this dusk shot for an additional price. That being said, this house was shot, I timed it from the time I pulled up in my car until the time I got in my car and everything was packed up. It took me 59 minutes to shoot this, and 20 minutes set up, and the rest of the time was just waiting and getting the right exposure and just basically shooting it as the sun went down. The other thing was post-production took about a half hour to get rid of all that stuff. So how much is an hour and a half of your time worth? And I think that's something you got to think about in comparison to what else you do, and think about the time of day that you have to be there and the distance you have to travel. So how do you price that? Well, I guess there's no real easy answer, but I definitely recommend thinking about it and going ahead and offering that as an additional service. I don't think it'll work with every house, but it'll work with some. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and have a good one.